All right. Hello. Thank you to everyone who is joining us here tonight. We are so excited to have this pivotal conversation about what's happening in Chicago, stopping the ICE raids, and making sure that we as a community are banding together to stand up for our rights. So please let us know where you're joining us from. Drop your name in the chat, where you're coming from, and what you are hoping to learn from today's call. You can also let us know what you are doing in response to the rapid escalation of ICE raids and militarization in our communities. So let us know where you're coming from. Welcome from Minnesota, Illinois. We're so excited to have you all here. All right. YouTube is showing out tonight. Right. Hey, Philly, Ozona, Florida. Worcester. Oside, West Coast represent. I'm Risa. I am the digital manager here at Women's March. I'm coming to you from Pomona, California. I'm here on the West Coast, best coast. We can go back and forth about it. I know how y'all like to tussle. Now, we do have some rules for the road. We like to keep it friendly in the chat, and we like the chat to be a place for community. So please make sure that in the chat we are being kind to each other. Approach with curiosity instead of judgment. Assume each other's best intent. Assume that everybody is coming from a place of curiosity and wanting to learn from each other. And we will take care to make sure that if the chat is getting abusive, if people are spamming the chat, and if people are just making it not so friendly a community to be a part of, we'll take care of it because we are heavy-handed on the ban hammer. So be excellent to each other, or you will be blocked and banned. Now, keep letting us know where you're coming from. This is going to be recorded. This call is recorded, and it will be on YouTube tomorrow. We are also going to send out any resources and links that are mentioned here tonight in an email. So if you registered, you will get that email and all those resources, and also the link to the replay. So rest assured that information will all be there for you tomorrow. Additionally, if you need closed captioning to enjoy and participate tonight, we recommend joining us on Facebook. We can drop that link in the chat as well. So if you are on YouTube, and you need closed captioning, please join us on Facebook. YouTube hasn't really caught up as well as Facebook has. So excellent. We have someone who wants to know what they can do to help. And that's what we're here for tonight. We want people to understand what's happening in real time, how communities are responding, and how you can be a part of that in your own communities, or how you can be supportive of the communities where this is happening, like Chicago. We are talking a lot about Chicago tonight because this is just the latest in what has been the latest city to be invaded and raided. And so we know, though, that this is happening all over the country. We are not trying to exclude anybody because this is something that we need to understand how to respond to across the country. In fact, Atlanta, thanks for joining us. Y'all are experiencing it too. Here in LA, we were experiencing it as well. And so we all want to know how we can fight off ICE and push back on authoritarianism. So thank you for being here. Make sure you ask your questions in the chat, by the way, because we will be answering as many questions as we can at the end of the program. So make sure you ask there. We are keeping our eye on the chat. The speakers may not answer your questions as they come in, so rest assured, we're going to do our best to try to get to them. And a lot of people ask the same questions or similar questions as well. So just know that we'll probably do some question consolidation as well if we're seeing a lot of the same questions. So thanks again for being here with us tonight. This is a way of showing up. Being here together tonight is how we choose connection and action when the news feels like an avalanche. So tonight we're here because of what's happening right now in Chicago and because it demands a national response. Donald Trump ordered the National Guard into Chicago under a new so-called Department of War Security directive. The stated goal: to protect ICE and federal agents. Not the people, but ICE and federal agents. And we know what that really means, so let's be clear. This is a military occupation. Specifically, it's an escalation of Operation Midway Blitz, the same operation that has directed ICE agents to storm homes, zip tie children, and tear families apart in the name of security. This operation's been weaponized to silence immigrants and push people deeper into the shadows. Now, under this new directive, we're seeing military deployment inside US cities. Soldiers are on American streets under the banner of war security. That language isn't accidental, it's authoritarian. It's about normalizing militarized control over dissent, over movement, and over our very ability to gather and resist. ICE has always been the tip of the spear for authoritarian control, testing how far the state can go in criminalizing entire communities, disappearing people, and turning cruelty into policy. Now that violence is being scaled up. The deployment of the National Guard is meant to shield ICE and turn federal agents into an untouchable military force. The administration is trying to send a message that their power is absolute and any challenge to it will be met with force. It's the authoritarian playbook in motion. Create chaos, call it security, target the vulnerable, and then use fear to justify even more repression. But we know another playbook, the people's playbook. It's the one that says when they militarize our neighborhoods, we organize our neighbors. When they spread fear, we build care networks. When they weaponize lies, we tell the truth, loudly, publicly, and together. The people of Chicago are not backing down. Community defense networks are mobilizing. Legal observers are documenting. Families are protecting one another. Organizers are holding the line, and the spirit of resistance that has always defined the city is alive and fierce. They want to make examples out of us. We make movements instead. So tonight we're coming together because none of us can face this moment alone. What's happening in Chicago is not isolated. It's a warning and a wake-up call, but it's also an opportunity to unite across city lines and movements to say, we will not be divided and we will not be intimidated. We've learned from history, from Standing Rock, from Portland, from Ferguson, from LA, that when they bring militarized force, we bring solidarity. When they send troops, we send truth. When they try to occupy our communities, we remind them the people are the power here. In just a moment, we'll be hearing directly from Chicago organizers who've been on the ground since the first reports came in. People witnessing firsthand what this occupation looks like and leading the fight to defend their communities. They'll share updates, ways to plug in, and what support looks like right now, from national amplification to local mutual aid to legal defense efforts. So stay with us, take notes, ask your questions in the chat, and most importantly, get ready to take action, because as long as they bring war to our streets, we will bring resistance, organized, courageous, and unstoppable. So let's get started with Kelly Hayes.
Hi, everyone. My name is Kelly Hayes. I am an author and organizer here in Chicago. I want to thank the Women's March for welcoming Chicagoans into this space tonight. And I want to thank everyone who's tuning in from around the country for showing up to hear our stories. What's happening in Chicago hasn't gotten enough national attention, And the stories you have seen in the corporate press rarely reflect the reality of what we're up against. As you may know, hundreds of National Guard troops have been federalized and are currently staging near Chicago. But that's just part of the story. In the corporate media, Trump's war on Chicago has largely been reduced to the question of whether or not the Guard would be deployed. But for weeks now, our city has been under assault by federal agents. The Department of Homeland Security claims to have apprehended more than 1,000 people across Chicagoland in what they're calling Operation Midway Blitz, a violent spree of kidnappings during which people have been pulled from their homes, beds, workplaces, neighborhoods, and bus stops. Parents have been snatched from behind the wheel of their cars while their children were left screaming in the back seat. Protesters who have put their bodies on the line to halt ICE vehicles, or in some cases, simply pleaded with agents to have some humanity, have been gassed, shot with pepper balls, brutalized, and arrested. ICE agents have also shot 2 people in the Chicagoland area with live ammunition, killing one and injuring another. In the village of Franklin Park, Silverio Villegas Gonzalez was shot dead by ICE after dropping his children off at school. In Chicago's Brighton Park neighborhood, a woman was shot by ICE agents last week while sitting in her car. In both cases, ICE told elaborate stories about their agents firing in response to deadly threats, stories that don't match available evidence. In Brighton Park, as protesters and onlookers gathered in the wake of ICE's latest shooting, agents deployed tear gas in a residential neighborhood, gassing protesters, first responders, and people who were just trying to get home. Last Friday, ICE dropped a tear gas canister on a residential street in Logan Square after being heckled by community members who had observed and loudly denounced their presence. Imagine seeing kidnappers prowling through your neighborhood and being gassed alongside your neighbors and children for telling the brutes to get out. Last week, we also saw an extreme escalation when ICE raided an entire apartment building at 75th Street and South Shore Drive. Agents rappelled from helicopters onto the building's roof, broke down doors, and dragged citizens and non-citizens alike from their homes in the night. Every resident was detained while ICE assessed their legal status and supposedly checked for outstanding warrants. Children were snatched from their beds and zip-tied together in the street. Some of those small children were kept in the street naked and weeping for hours before some were forced into government vans. When neighbors from nearby buildings expressed concern for the children, one of the agents laughed and said, "Fuck them kids." Residents of that building described the looting of their homes with valuables and even furniture seized and toys and personal papers scattered across hallways. The government filmed their assault on that apartment building and created an Instagram reel that framed the attack as a military operation, because that's what they're creating out here. While they are destroying lives and ripping families apart, they are creating content for their fascist propaganda. I myself was part of a crowd of protesters that was attacked by ICE hours after state police had forced us out of the street, preventing us from blockading any ICE vehicles near the Broadview Detention Center. We posed no threat to ICE, nor sadly at that time, any obstacle to their violent routines. As a disruptive force, we had already been subdued, but ICE, led by Border Patrol Chief Gregory Bovino, marched up the street with 2 cameramen in tow and 2 drones filming from above and violently attacked the crowd anyway, arresting multiple protesters. I was one of those injured. I have also been gassed and shot with pepper balls by federal agents while attending protests at the Broadview ICE facility, where many of our kidnapped neighbors are being processed. But my injuries are nothing in comparison to the violence, the indignities, the inhumane conditions being endured by our stolen neighbors who are being deprived of their liberty and who are currently in the grip of this country's deportation machine. These are parents, children, neighbors, workers, and members of our beloved communities, and we want them back. We demand an end to these violent attacks and the theft of our neighbors, Because regardless of who Donald Trump wants in the United States of America, Chicago loves and welcomes immigrants. I'm talking to you tonight because I want you to understand the urgency of this moment. People are being violently torn from our communities each day. People are being gunned down in the street. People are being tear gassed in residential neighborhoods. The scale of dehumanization and war making we are faced with in this moment is stunning. And now, federalized National Guard troops are staging nearby. Trump has declared war on Chicago, but we are not a conquered city or a conquered people. We are protesting. We are engaging in political education efforts to sharpen our skills and analysis so we can meet the moment and keep each other safe as much and as often as possible. Even tonight, people are marching downtown. In the building I'm in right now, community members are attending a protest health and safety workshop so that they can help care for each other when we're under attack. Because during the protests at ICE's Broadview facility, we've learned that having great street medics, which our city does, is not enough. When the government enacts violence recreationally and with abandon upon us, we all need to up our game and be ready to care for each other. My bad shoulder got wrenched during one of last week's attacks on protesters, so I'm off the front lines of protest for a minute. So I pivoted to ICE patrols this week because there is always something to do here. And our ICE Watch and rapid response infrastructure needs more people always. The federal government has been clear that there is no end in sight to this assault. And I will tell you, we are tired. Our people have been exhausting themselves, providing support, care, information, and warning to our communities. But our organizing infrastructure has not buckled. Know Your Rights education work, which has helped keep a lot of our people here in our communities where they belong, is ongoing. Rapid response, mutual aid, and protest will continue. But we need you to know what we're up against, because this isn't just our fight, and we're not just waging it for ourselves or our neighbors, but for all of us. Because that's what's really on the line here. All of us and everything we hold dear. If you believe in freedom, if you believe that Trump should not be able to wage war against our communities or snatch our neighbors from their beds or bus stops, if you believe that federalized troops have no place in our cities and that putting troops on the ground in this moment is a prelude to military interference in future elections, then this is one struggle and one fight. Chicago is a front line, just as LA and DC have been front lines, and just as Portland is a front line. But we cannot be siloed in our approach to politics right now. We cannot simply hope that the chaos being rained down upon others won't make its way to our doors, because that is how fascists win. They believe they can conquer you, whether they've raised a hand against you or not, because they believe you will cooperate, that you will accept violence against others, that you will keep your head down and hope for the best. But I believe the struggle we are waging here, even on days when we take one hell of a beating, has the potential to remind you all of what you're made of and that this is your fight too. I love this city and I believe in Chicago, and I hope that you will too. I hope that you'll feel that tonight you are all Chicagoans and that we are all part of something much larger than ourselves as we raise our voices and act against fascism, because we have to be. To defend our values, each other, and the future itself, we must meet this moment with collective courage, solidarity, and an uncompromising rejection of fascist politics. So please hold the line and surrender no one and nothing. And with that, I'd like to hand it off to Cynthia from, sorry, I'm used to pronouncing the acronym out loud, from the Immigrant Coalition for Refugee Rights.
Thank you, Kelly. And I got you, Kelly. Hi, everyone. This is Cynthia with ICER, the Illinois Coalition for Immigrant and Refugee Rights. So thankful to be here, to have that super helpful background and analysis from Kelly that grounds us in what we've been seeing this past month. and also really grateful to be here with Benji and Alderwoman Rosana. But I wanted to take some time to share with folks about the work that's been happening in the not just Chicago, but throughout the region, throughout the state, in terms of rapid response, and share how we've approached this work, um, and and how that's looked like in practice. Um, and for folks who aren't familiar, ICER, the Illinois Coalition for Immigrant and Refugee Rights, is a coalition made up of member organizations throughout the state that are committed to immigrant justice. But really, from the north suburbs of Illinois to the Chicago area, which is home for me, to the southwest suburbs and really all throughout the state. We have seen our members and community at large resisting the violent attacks that Kelly has discussed on our communities by DHS, by ICE, by CBP, right? The night raids, the snatching of our people off the street, the separating of families, the murder of Silverio Villegas Gonzalez, and so much more, right? We know that federal agents are everywhere, throughout the city, throughout the state. And we know that because ICER, the Illinois Coalition for Immigrant and Refugee Rights, runs a hotline that has been promoted all throughout the state. It's the hotline to call for ICE sightings and more, which I'll discuss in a little bit. But the hotline has received over 12,000 calls since the beginning of the year. The highest amount of calls in the hotline history happened last Friday, and so we know that that activity is happening, that violence is happening everywhere. But that also means, as calls come in, that everywhere neighbors are looking out for each other. Everywhere community members are having each other's backs and resisting what's happening and the violence that we're experiencing, because we know that ISIS attacks, that ISIS lies are not new, but what we're seeing is in so many different ways unprecedented. And I want to also just give a shout out to comrades in LA and DC that have shared their lessons learned, what they've been seeing with us here in the Chicago area. For us at ICER, it's been really helpful to think about the work as the work to protect and defend, one, the work to resist, two, and the work of rapid response, three. Protect and defend, right? The work that we can do to make sure our communities know their rights. And we know that just because we know our rights doesn't mean that there won't be abuses perpetuated against us, but we know that we have to exercise our rights so we don't lose them. The work to resist, the work that we do with y'all or with other people to fight and advocate. And then the work of rapid response, which is really possible because of the family support hotline that we have, that has been so essential to folks being able to respond as fast as possible to ICE on the streets, to Border Patrol on the streets, through Operation Midway Blitz, but also Operation at Large. So as I shared, ICER runs a family support hotline and has received over 12,000 calls since the beginning of the year. It's a hotline that was launched over a decade ago to connect people to support. And it started volunteer run. But today, October 2025, now we have trained live operators that connect callers to resources, but also to rapid response networks all over the city and all over the state. And it's so important for us to make sure that the operators have the most recent and verified information as they're taking folks' calls. And really, the hotline functions as a one-stop shop to provide information concerning issues that impact our immigrant communities here in Illinois. And so the calls come in. Calls are to report ICE activity, for deportation cases, for deportation defense, for legal aid, for healthcare resources, public benefits resources, for people to know their workplace rights. And so a call comes into the hotline and it goes to one of 11 designated languages, depending on the language of the caller. And In particular, people are funneled to different operators depending on what their need is. But we have a designated deportation defense part of the hotline that happens in partnership with folks at Organized Communities Against Deportation, OCAD. Huge shout out to OCAD, Organized Communities Against Deportations. Please give them a follow on social media if you haven't. This work wouldn't happen without them and wouldn't exist without them. And we are so grateful to do this in partnership. And of course, people come in and call the hotline for legal referrals, which is really one of the biggest needs that we have right now. And so the hotline, someone reports a sighting, an ICE sighting to the hotline. What happens after? This is when rapid response work is activated. And so I want to take a couple of minutes to really flesh out what that looks like. We've trained over 7,000 people in rapid response work in the region. And this work and the way that it's happening and the way that people are activated is really only possible because of the groundwork that has been laid for years since the last Trump administration. And again, this is work that's done in partnership. This is work that we do not do by ourselves. And for us, rapid response is really understanding that it's not just showing up when there's a raid happening, but it's really the work that we do as community, as neighbors, to move resources, to move support during crisis situations. And in this case, the crisis is the raids. It's the actions by CBP, by ICE, by DHS. And so we think about rapid response as the work that happens before, during, and after a raid. The mutual aid work that we do, right, is a huge component of that, but also the organizing that can happen after. Rapid response work doesn't stay in a vacuum. The reports, the information is used and should be used to support organizing campaigns. And so through ICER, we're able to coordinate networks of teams, train members, and folks who anchor those teams to provide real-time support. And rapid response means that people can be connected to resources, that we can understand patterns and track abuses, that we can grow our collective organizing, and that we can be clear that what's happening to immigrant communities affects all of us. And of course, the work of rapid response and the different components of it, from knowing our rights to knowing how to watch and document ICE, and the resources and support that we provide before, during, and after, are really rooted in learning from traditions of community defense in the US, but also in all of our different home countries. And of course, this lineage includes all the credit, in particular, to the Black Panther Party and their practice of Cop Watch to document police brutality, right? As immigrant organizers, were introduced to Cop Watch, learning about Cop Watch, and then connecting it to how ICE works in particular ways, is how Chicago groups were able to build rapid response infrastructure and then bring to light, expose the violations that happen at the hands of federal agents. But I just really want to underscore, right, that the work that we do around rapid response and the approach is that we're not just trying to watch ICE, we're trying to take care of our people, right? We want to connect folks to resources, and we want to be with our people before, during, and after. So just wanted to really emphasize that. And I'm sure folks here are already participating in rapid response teams, but if you're not, or if you've been wanting to, the different roles that you can play in a rapid response team can look like this. And I want to share what those can look like, but also stress that that it does require different kinds of training, right? You should definitely, if you haven't done a Know Your Rights training, do that before you join a rapid response team. Do an ICE Watch training before you join a rapid response team. But there's a lot of roles to be played within a rapid response team. We need someone who's a verifier, right? Someone who can put together the puzzle of what has happened during a raid, and report it all the way through when they get there. Someone who's all about engagement, who's accompanying the verifier, and is providing critical Know Your Rights information to people that might be getting detained. So those are two 3, we need someone who's really centered around care, the care that can happen after a raid, pinging the support that's needed. 4, social media, making sure that verified raids are being reported. And then we need rights defenders, right? We need people who are sharing these resources, distributing materials, sending people to trainings. And again, this rapid response work that happens is how we activate an ecosystem of support and take care of our people all throughout what's happening. Before a raid, we are able to familiarize ourselves with materials, again, with Know Your Rights materials, but also with our local rapid response teams. So before a raid is when we can do that work of getting connected to our local rapid response teams. It's so important that before you share anything on social media, right, that you make sure you're sharing something that has been verified. And in particular here in Illinois, that's something you can do by calling the hotline to make sure that anything you've heard or you've seen gets verified. And then, we've talked about what happens during the raid, putting the puzzle together, getting a clear picture of what's happened, because that information can then be used in legal cases or for organizing. And then what happens after a raid, right? We know that people can so quickly be passed through the deportation pipeline. I'm sure folks know, or folks might have seen, right, at the beginning of Operation Midway Blitz here in Chicago, one of the first targets, people who were detained by ICE, was a flower vendor on a big street in Chicago by my house. And a couple days later, right, he came on a video on TikTok to talk about how he was in Mexico within days. So we know that these things can happen really quickly, and that what happens after a raid really depends on a person's immigration history, and that dictates, right, a lot of how people's process will go in terms of what they have to undergo. And so this is sharing how here this infrastructure has really allowed for different kinds of response in the Chicago region, in the state, that it's taken work to build up this infrastructure, that it doesn't happen by ourselves, and that we need more people, that everything that Kelly shared is true about people being tired, burnt out, tear gassed, and connected, right, to the people that are being kidnapped by ICE and CBP. And so this is what has been built up, and this is what folks are tapped into that are have been on the streets every day, since the dawn, at all hours of the day, looking out for our people. So we also acknowledge, right, that this is what we've seen here in Chicago, and even within the Chicago area, each community is different. As we've trained folks and connected them to the network, we know that it's actually the local communities that are going to shape what this looks like. And at the end of the day, really being really clear that all of our work must center the immediate needs of people that are being directly impacted. So if folks want to learn more about this work, you can check out ICER's website, and we'll drop a link in the chat that'll be directly about this work around the Family Support Network, the FSN. But hope this helps, and there's some lessons here for folks and helpful information. But with that, I'm gonna go ahead and pass it over to Benji.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much, Cynthia. Thank you so much, Women's March, and really grateful to all the really smart, powerful people that I get to share this call with in Chicago and well beyond. My name is Benji Hart. I use they, them pronouns. I'm a member of Southside Together. I'm also a member at Concord Missionary Baptist Church here on the south side of Chicago, and with the Public Health and Safety Campaign. And I'm going to hopefully talk a little bit about both of those two things in the context of what's happening right now on the ground in Chicago. Concord Missionary Baptist Church is a historically Black Baptist church in the Woodlawn neighborhood here in Chicago that over the last 2 years has been welcoming in migrants, primarily from Venezuela, and building uh, uh, a multiracial coalition within the church and within the Woodlawn neighborhood, which has been a really exciting and healing site from a lot of the violence that has been happening between Black and Brown, between immigrant and non-immigrant communities in the neighborhood as the result of a closed school in the community being converted into a migrant shelter without the consent of local residents. I wrote an article about that for Hammer and Hope. If you want to hear a little bit more about that story and the story of this congregation in detail, you can definitely check out that article. But I think the really important thing to talk about is the coalitions that are being built on the ground between historically segregated neighborhoods and communities to fight back against the militarization that is happening currently in Chicago. In our congregation, Concord Missionary Baptist Church, some migrant congregants who have been coming for the last 2 years made the decision to self-deport just this last week. And we're seeing a lot of folks who have been consistent members being much more reluctant to leave the house and to come to church. So already we're seeing the direct impact in these really painful ways of ICE raids in particular, and the general threat of militarization that we're dealing with in such a constant and exhausting way currently in Chicago. But I think for myself, as a Black queer person and a long-term organizer here in Chicago, I became a member at Concord Missionary Baptist Church just because they needed Spanish interpretation. And it was this effort happening in my neighborhood that I was not a part of starting, but was really grateful and excited to see happening. And I started showing up to help with the language barrier and became really involved in the church. And I think it's been teaching me so many important lessons that we're seeing, I think, being replicated in other parts of the city about what it means to really commit to building broad coalitions and working with people who we're actually not politically aligned with or not 100% politically aligned with. And what is that discernment between folks that share a different value than we do, who come from a different culture than we do, and may believe different things than what we believe, but are still folks that we can find a middle ground with, and still folks that having those relationships is actually how we get aligned. And if we refuse to be in space with each other, we can't work on alignment, versus who are the folks, who are the bodies, who are the agencies that are our enemies, and that it's not about shifting them or aligning, getting them more aligned. It's about resisting them, and it's about fighting back against them. And I think really getting involved on the ground with other Black folks in my neighborhood who didn't necessarily identify as organizers, who weren't necessarily going to marches and protests and rallies, but wanted to be good neighbors and wanted to welcome migrants into their community and provide a home base for them. It was so important to find those folks and connect with those folks. And over the last 2 years, I think there's been an incredible shift in terms of political alignment and in terms of changing people's perceptions of each other, breaking down anti-immigrant racism and anti-Black racism as barriers between Black and Brown immigrant and non-immigrant communities in the city, but also actually getting folks prepared and in the fight for each other and seeing their fights as genuinely linked, not just in rhetoric, but in terms of actually what is happening on the ground. And as Kelly and other folks have already said really eloquently, the attacks this last week in Bronzeville, which is my neighborhood, and South Shore, which is not far from the church at all, we see that ICE is being implemented to attack all undesirable, unwanted, and non-white communities. And so it's not just figurative when we say that our battles are interconnected and can't be separated. We are seeing now in real time that there's no separation between National Guard, between ICE, between police. They're all called in on the same communities for the same purpose, and it has nothing to do with public safety. And so while this is such a jarring and violent moment, and I don't want to shy away from that or undermine that, it's also a moment where the need for solidarity is so clear, and the ways in which our fights are inseparable is the mask is really off. we don't need proof. It's sitting right in front of us. We don't need to make that argument. We see it already happening on the ground. And with that, I think I want to talk a little bit more about the Public Health and Safety Campaign, which is a fight currently happening here to remove $300 million from this slush fund controlled by the Chicago Police Department to public health and public safety initiatives that are non-police and non-carceral, namely reopening mental health clinics, providing non-police mental health crisis responses, as well as giving funding to the Department of Public Health, which we know is going to be slashed because of most of those funds being provided by the federal government. And this campaign has also been a really important point of cross-city solidarity, cross-community solidarity, and I think leaning on the organizing efforts and the demands that we've already been building on over generations here in Chicago, namely police and prison abolition in particular, and understanding the fight against ICE, which for me is, we must say, is the fight to abolish ICE, is just as inseparable from larger fights of demilitarization and abolition. So I think another thing that's really been grounding me and grounding folks around me is remembering that the fights we are already engaged in and the demands we've been lifting over the long term, the demand to abolish ICE being a primary one in this moment, those demands are still salient. And we actually have an opportunity to align a lot more people behind those demands in these moments, and being proactive in doing that, being proactive in saying, we know the federal government is going to cut these social programs. It's going to cut violence prevention. It's going to cut all these things that have led to one of the safest, one of the least violent summers we've had in Chicago in decades. We know the federal government is going to cut those programs. Where is the funding for those programs going to come from? As Black organizers have said for the longest, it can come from the police department budget, which is already massive and being used to terrorize and to kill and to harm our communities. That is not where public safety comes from. And those reframes are so salient in this moment when the federal government is spending $2 million a day to deploy the National Guard in our cities, when ICE's budget has been massively expanded to unprecedented levels, and we see how much safety that's creating for our communities. Now is really a time to remind folks what are the demands that we've been making for the long term, and how do we not forget about them and abandon them in this moment of crisis, because hanging on to the fights that we're already engaged in and making sure that we're bringing in new people and folks we might not have considered aligned with us previously, that is so necessary for what we're doing right now, and so necessary in terms of building the actual relationships we need to fight fascism. And we're going to need deep relationships because this is a long-term fight, as so many folks have already said. I know there's a lot more to talk about, but I'm going to pause there and hopefully have more time to talk with folks in the Q&A. But now I am honored to hand it over to 33rd Ward Alderwoman Rosana Rodriguez.
Thank you so much for joining us tonight. You are on Alderwoman Rodriguez.
I am so sorry. I was getting a call and the whole thing dropped. Hi, everybody. Alderwoman Rosana Rodriguez from the 33rd Ward in Chicago. It is amazing to see my people in Chicago throwing down. If you haven't noticed yet, Chicago is an incredible place full of people who care deeply about each other and who are always ready to throw down. We, as Kelly said, are tired, but I think that one of the things that is giving me so much hope right now is the force with which people are coming out. First, thank you so much, Kelly, for bringing me into this conversation, and thank you to the Women's March for having this space. I think it's so important that right now we promote conversation across cities to share our experiences.
Looks like the Alderwoman is having technical difficulties, so we'll give her a minute. But please continue asking your questions. We have some incredible conversations happening here in the chat and lots of incredible questions that we're really excited to get to in just a few minutes. So keep joining each other in conversation. And also, I want to shout out Heather Shaner. Just sent 500 to ICIRR. If we each send money, they'll have monies to help people. This is one of the great ways that we can be supportive of organizations remotely. So thank you so much for contributing to the work that they are doing. And let me add Alderwoman back to the stage. Thank you for coming back.
Again, sorry. There is a lot happening right now everywhere, and my phone is blowing up. So I want to talk about a few things. One of the main things that I want to talk about is elected officials in this moment. We are really trying to use all of the resources that we have in our offices to make sure that we're supporting the organizing on the ground. Some of the things that I have been doing in my office, I'm collaborating with Senator Graciela Guzman to make sure that we are helping people connect with each other. We had a town hall about 3 weeks ago to start bringing people into the fold so people could connect with efforts that were already on the ground. And let me tell you, we had less than a week to put this town hall together in a school in my community. And we had over 500 people, almost 600 people showed up with like less than a week notice. People want to help. We have been doing corner watches, and this is apart from the rapid response work that we have been doing that is so important. We have been doing corner watch, which creates an opportunity for people that is more low barrier because we don't have to have as much training. This is just about having people outside and having eyes on the street so that we can be prepared and we know where ICE is at all times. We have been doing this in the perimeter of schools. We created perimeters for all of the schools in my ward, and we are having at least 4 people cover different corners across where schools are so that we know if immigration is close to a school. And we are doing 2 shifts a day. This is in the morning for drop-off and in the afternoon for pickup. I put a status on Facebook saying we need volunteers, and our phones have not stopped ringing. We have so many people that want to do this work that we don't have shifts for everybody. So I want to tell you right now, this is fascism. Fascism thrives on silence and on fear. And this is a moment where we cannot allow fear to immobilize us. We have to find the things that we can do, and we have to come together and do those things. So my office has been organizing and creating shifts for all of the people to be able to have them all covered. Right now, we are already full. All of the shifts have been taken for the whole week until Friday. And people are desperate to be involved. Like, people want to help each other. Tonight, apart from the health and safety, the protest health and safety workshop that Kelly was telling us about, there is in my community an assembly line created to do whistle kits, because we're using whistles a lot right now. And there's these signs that explain how to use the whistles. There are people right now at a bar that are putting that together, and they're doing parties in houses to like assemble these kits. There is so much that we can do right now, and we have to find even the most low barrier opportunities to be able to help each other. I have a ward superintendent. Ward superintendents are employees that supervise the cleaning and all the street work that goes on in our communities. He has a truck that he drives around our community. He is part of rapid response. He is in the street, and if there is any ICE presence, he report back. When he is doing work with the laborers, when he is doing work with garbage collection, he is always out there watching out for immigration enforcement. And that is a huge help, right? We are doing canvassing in businesses. We are giving away signs to businesses to make sure that it is um, identified where the private space starts, right? All of those are really important things that we need to be doing right now. Um, uh, our communities are also organizing walking school buses. At the town hall that we had 3 weeks ago, parents started to come together and share experiences with each other so that we can connect families with one another, so we can get babies safe to their homes or from their homes to school. This is a critical moment, and a critical situation, because a lot of our kids are missing school because their parents are scared, right, to send them to school. And we know that schools are so important for the well-being of kids and communities. A lot of kids have their meals at school. They have social emotional supports at school. We know that right now, this moment is impacting the mental health of families and particularly of children. We have had an increase of children in our schools that are talking about suicidal ideation, because it is so scary as a child to know that you can be taken from your parents, that your parents can be disappeared, and children are seeing this right now. So another thing that we're doing is starting support groups that can meet online for immigrant families, so that they can process, so that they can know that their neighbors are out there fighting for them, right? This is a really, really scary time, but we are not going to let fear paralyze us. We have to be responsible for each other. We have to make sure that we are caring about our neighbors right now as much as we care about ourselves. There is no other way to go through this. Um, Mutual aid. There are a number of organizations that are trying to get groceries to people, signing up for a shift, or organizing your community, your block, whatever space you're building, to make sure that we know what the needs are and offer, to drive groceries, to pick up groceries, to pick up medicine for somebody that cannot make it out of their home. Um, Here in my community, we have Albany Park Mutual Aid, and they partner with a food depository, and they have been recruiting drivers on Saturdays to deliver groceries and also to deliver formula and diapers to families. And that demand is increasing because people are scared to leave their homes. So all of those are things that are very important. I'm telling you this because right now, I think that it's really important that we demand that elected officials use the resources that they have to ensure that they are supporting the work on the ground. Many of my colleagues, particularly in the northwest side of Chicago, we are involved with rapid response. We drive around to verify, we organize, we are using our offices to print materials, to make sure that people have a place to meet. To the other day, I closed my office because I had about 6 abductions in my ward, and we were so scared for pickup at schools that I closed my office and I sent my staff. Everybody was posted at a school to support with Corner Watch. There's so much that we can be doing, and we have to demand that the people that are in leadership positions open up their offices, use their resources in order for us to be able to protect each other. Um, I am going to drop in the chat an article that came out today on Block Club, explaining a little bit about the work that we're doing with the Corner Watch. But there are people that have never been involved in anything movement related, and they are out there because they know that this moment requires the presence and the fight and the commitment of everyone to each other. I have all of the principals of my school organized, and we are learning from one another, from all the efforts that are taking place in schools. So I would say that this is a moment when we have to use our voices, we have to use our hands, we have to use our bodies, to be able to build that solidarity. And I am so incredibly proud of the city of Chicago, because people are absolutely coming through. And we're going to continue doing that. I'm going to leave it there, but I'm very happy to answer questions, and I'm happy to connect with people after this as well if people want to learn more about the work. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Alderwoman. And I'm going to add you back to the stage because we have so many questions. So I'm going to ask if y'all would be okay with spending an extra 10 minutes with us so we can get through some of them. Is everybody okay with that? I know that we are all.
I'll have to leave a little sooner than that, but
no worries. Yeah, I was expecting that you were going to be gone already. So thank you so much for staying with us this long. So first question, I've been thinking of going to Chicago. Is now the time?
If you're down, if you are down to throw down with us, yes, come to Chicago. We will give you shifts for corner watch.
And so let's see. So now, what can unweaponized citizens do to shut this down? Peaceful protests aren't working. So I'm going to start here because we at Women's March are going to plug us really quick. We are hosting a non-compliance training because one of the most effective ways of protesting at every level is non-compliance. So I'm going to drop that link in the chat because that's one way that you can actively participate in resistance from anywhere and, at any time. But from our Chicago friends, what are some ways that people can shut this down? I know we've had a pretty robust conversation about this tonight. You are muted.
There we go. I would just bring back the tactic of rapid response. It's a different way of using your body, of being in your body, and just really being there for people and bearing witness. And I think what we really wanted to, and I know I said this so many times, and then they're like, Cynthia, you're a broken record, but rapid response is really comprehensive. It's not just knowing your rights. It's not just watching ICE. It's like really, how are we building relationships with our community members? How is this not even just about this moment, but whatever is to come? And how are we building strong networks so that we can be prepared for anything and look out for each other? And so I would bring it back to really considering being part of rapid response networks, looking at what your local organizations are, and getting connected.
Can I add to that? There is a video that that has been circulating of a man getting arrested by ICE and people showing just their presence. Nobody did anything aggressive at all. People just showed up and started shouting. And I had to leave because there was so many people that kept coming to bear witness to what was happening and sort of shame them, and they started getting very anxious about it, and they ended up leaving. I think this is that time, right, when we go out and we make sure that we're accompanying people, that we are showing up and standing beside and shouting and doing everything that we possibly can to make sure that there is visibility, right, and that people don't feel alone. So there is a lot that we can actually do when it comes to peaceful protest.
And
Yeah.
Go
You
for
go.
it.
Yeah.
I was going to say super quick, and that happened a couple blocks away from my house. And I had actually just left my house like 30 minutes before that. And I think that's the other part of all of this is like, you never know when this is going to happen. People are living their lives, and this is happening parallel to all the different ways in which we're living our lives. So like the more that we can share information, and it's not to be cheesy, but it's really like, you never know what your conversation will lead to another conversation, and sometimes that will empower people enough that maybe they've never gone to a Know Your Rights, maybe they've never done an ICE watch, maybe they're not connected to any organization, but in that moment they can feel empowered to, as the other woman was sharing, right, to do something and to be there, and to shame them. So yeah, just would want to bring that back too.
Yeah,
I really want to give mad props to organizations like Cynthia's that have done so much Know Your Rights work. I want to emphasize that folks knowing how to stay out of contact with ICE whenever possible in the first place has done more than anything to keep a lot of our people here where they belong. I think we should really look at that ground level work very seriously. How are we helping people create baseline layers of protection for themselves? Also, of course, form a crowd and get loud being a really important tactic. Sometimes the bullies back off, form a crowd, make a scene, make them uncomfortable. This is important. It sometimes works. At Broadview, some of us were putting our bodies on the line, trying to block vehicles and trying to physically get in the way of ISIS work. The state police has mobilized a unified command with the Cook County Sheriff's Department that has made the work of blocking those vehicles pretty much impossible at this point. We've been shuffled into First Amendment zones. But this is a thing that happens when we protest. We try a maneuver, and the system adapts. And so we have to keep adapting. We have to stay nimble. We have to keep looking for those moments of opportunity where we can get in the way. And we have to embody our values in a lot of ways. I know everyone wants to be really effective right now. I keep hearing that word from people, like, what's the effective thing? And when they say that, a lot of times they mean is like, what is this one magic thing we can do that's going to put a stop to this nightmare? And there is not a single tactic. There is not a magic bullet here that if we all do this one thing and preferably only have to do it once, this stops. It's going to take a whole lot of tactics. It's going to take all of us pushing at this thing from all sides. And I also really encourage you to remember that direct action, that protest, is not just about things that have immediate outcomes. Sometimes it's about bringing our community together. Sometimes it's inviting people into a sense of political communion so they even know what it feels like to be part of an us, to have shared values, to have a sense of empowerment. And then maybe from there flow the more meaningful invitations into action. So start creating space for that too. It matters. It's not going to change the math concretely today, but honestly, no singular action that we take is going to do that. We need more people power. So we need to help people find each other. And right now, a lot of scared, upset, just reeling people are alone together in the glow of their screens. We have to get past that stage. We need to be getting into spaces together, talking to our neighbors. Like what Rosanna was talking about, where there were 600 people at that meeting. I was at that meeting, and I've been at a number of others where hundreds of people have been coming together. That's how the magic happens. That's how we find our people and start plotting and scheming and dreaming up brilliant ways that we can be useful together. So please find your people. That's where the good stuff happens.
Benji, did you want to chime in? I know you've been.
That's okay. I'll wait for the next one.
Great. So actually, this one might be great for you then, because we've had a lot of people asking, is it better for people from far away to come to the protest on the 18th? Or is there a place to send what we'd spend doing that to help more local people get there? And in tandem to that, if we go to Chicago, who do we contact? How do we sign up to help?
Oh, okay. I think let's start with all the organizations that you're seeing on this call are a really great start. ICER is a really good start. OCAD, which has also been mentioned, Organized Communities Against Deportation. But there are many other organizations on this call that you should support, that you should donate to. that are doing the rapid response work, the work of creating containers for people to join, which is really what we need right now. I think showing support cross city and cross state is important. Thank you so much, Kelly. See you later. I think having solidarity across cities and across states is important, and not treating these like isolated fights is really important, in terms of how we share tactics, how we share information. That being said, we also really need people doing this work everywhere. We need people doing it in rural areas. We need people doing it in the South, in the North, on the West Coast, on the East Coast. Wherever you are, the work that we're talking about doing is necessary and is needed. So I think it's also less about how do we get support for Chicago and more how do we create a united front wherever we are, from wherever we're at. And I think that starts with calls like this, making sure that, again, we're not just having conversations, but we're actually sharing tactics, sharing resources, learning from what's happening in our respective contexts. So we know how to apply what's happening into Chicago to wherever you are, apply what's happening in LA to what's happening in Chicago, so on and so forth. So I think it's actually a lot more about how do we plug in where we're at, because we need people everywhere. And because the larger space, the larger the jurisdiction that our networks cover, the more people we can help and the more people we can support. And I think that goes back to actually the conversation about protests not working. I think we've said the word fascism on this call, but I think it's really, really important that we understand that that's a mandate. It's not a big fancy word we're throwing around. It's a mandate. And fascism doesn't care about numbers. And fascism doesn't care about people making statements. Fascism has to be shamed. It has to be blocked. It has to be called out. And when people say we can't be afraid right now, that's what they mean. However we find our people is good. If going to a mass protest helps you find your people, that's good. But we got to get connected. We got to get connected into containers that can then help direct us towards things like rapid response. We have to be ready to respond in the moment, like folks have already said beautifully. The best kind of protest is the kind that stops ICE from doing what they're doing. And thousands of us marching in the street downtown doesn't necessarily do that. But 10 of us getting around an ICE vehicle and making a scene and not allowing them to kidnap the person that they're trying to kidnap can actually be way more meaningful than 1,000 of us being downtown when nothing is happening there. So actually thinking about, again, where is the violence happening and how do we interrupt it? Not how do we make statements against it? Because we already know, that's the encouraging thing about this moment. We already know these are massively unpopular things. We already know the majority of people don't want to see what is happening happen. But if we're silent and if we're afraid and if we just sit and complain while it's happening, that's how we lose. We have the numbers, but we have to turn those numbers into actions, direct actions that actually stop fascism from doing what it's trying to do. And that doesn't happen by just speaking out against it. That happens by really getting in the way. So wherever you're at, get in the way of ICE and what they're doing. Get in the way of militarization, stop it from happening, because just shouting it down from the side is not going to work. It's already a minority of people who want these things to happen, but they're going to do them unless someone stops them. And so we can't wait for someone else to be the person who puts themselves in the way. Each one of us has to be willing to put ourselves in the way based on our individual risk, in the way that makes the most sense. So I think I'm echoing other people at this point, but really thinking about where do we put ourselves to block the violence from happening? How do we make a scene? How do we make it impossible for ICE to do what they do without a scene being made every single time, without people being shouted down and shamed every single time, and without us calling more of our neighbors and more of our people to come in and bear witness? That should happen every single time. And so wherever you live, do that. Wherever you live, that's what you should be doing where you're at, and getting other people into the fold with you, joining organizations, joining trainings, so that everyone feels empowered to do that and to use their voice in that way. When people talk about not being afraid and using their voice, that's, I think, what we need to think about. Not 1,000 people marching in the downtown, but the 5 people who screamed and shouted until ICE let that person go.
Can I say, Benji, to that, we are going to be scared, because it's a scary moment. We just have to act regardless. We just have to sit with the fear, and we have to understand what fear is going to do to our bodies, what fear is going to do to our minds, right? And then we just have to shake it off, and we have to know that we're not alone, right? And that there are people that want to build with us. There are people everywhere that want to be out there right now and that don't know how to, and it is our responsibility, right, to make sure that we're bringing everybody in. One initiative that I neglected to say when I was speaking is Latino Union, which is an organization here in Chicago that supports day laborers and domestic workers. They have an initiative that is called Adopt a Corner, where people can just go pick a corner wherever there are day laborers in your community, and just go and lend your eyes to make sure that they are protected. That is like a really easy thing to do. If you have half an hour, give us half an hour. If you have an hour, give us an hour. Build relationships with those people, get to know your neighbors, and make sure that you know what they need at that moment, right? um, just wanted to throw that out there, because there's so many ways in which we can collaborate right now, and in which we can build initiatives that keep us safer. And I think that imagining that is really important. So having examples of all of this work is going to be important for all of us.
All right, I think we have time for one more question, and this one came up a lot. What is the online source for Know Your Rights? Is there a great training that you recommend? What are some resources that you would hope that that you want people to walk away from, so they can be better at understanding, so that they can understand what their rights are and how to operate within them?
Tell them, Cynthia.
There's so many. We could send a whole list. But the link that I shared earlier, I think it's like icer.org/FSN, has a lot of different one pagers, fact sheets around like knowing your rights in particular areas. So if you're driving, and just different places, so folks, regardless of where they're at, can feel free to check those out. There's also at the national level, Mi Gente, MIJENTE has put out some really great Know Your Rights materials. But yeah, there's if folks want to share others, but those are two places to start.
I just dropped in the chat the Block Club article that came out today about Corner Watch. If people want to learn a little bit more about how it works, read the article.
This has been such a robust conversation, and I'm so thankful that you were able to join us. I know it's a really busy time for all of you, and we are so grateful for not only your time, but for what you're doing in the community, and for sharing your experiences and what other people can be doing across the country. This really does take us all, and it does take us all finding our people, finding community with each other locally, and joining hands across the country to demonstrate that we are united and that we will not let this fly. So thank you all for being with us. Thank you to the audience for joining us tonight. It has been an incredible conversation. Your questions have been so insightful. Please watch out for your emails. We will send links and resources. We will have even more resources than we probably talked about tonight in that email. So if you registered, please expect that. Thank you again for being here with us tonight. Have a good one.
Thank you, everyone.